Hi, I'm Matthew Codaro. This is my presentation on the law and ethics of autonomous motor vehicles. I'm positive nearly everyone watching this owns either a smartwatch or has some smart home tech such as a Nest thermostat, maybe a body weight scale with Bluetooth, or perhaps simply a Fitbit, but most certainly you own a smartphone. But my point is that computer technology is everywhere. Technology is being integrated into our lives at a breakneck pace, with great social impacts. Unfortunately, our justice system isn't built to deal with the quickly growing legal issues that arise from these technologies. This leaves many legal and ethical questions in the hands of the programmers and their lawyers. In this slide, you see the three most important communication technologies in United States history. Alongside them are the dates with they became available for public use, followed by the dates of the common carrier laws which strictly govern their usage. In each case, it took a minimum of 35 years to enact the laws. What is a truly autonomous car? For argument's sake, we will define the fully autonomous car using the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration's definition, which is the car is designed to perform all safety-critical driving functions and monitor roadway conditions for an entire trip. Also, its occupants are not expected to be available for control at any time during the trip. That is to say, a human can get in, set a location, ignore everything, read a book, watch a movie, until they get to their destination. In fact, under this definition, a human need not be in the vehicle. Before we ask some of the ethical questions faced by a programmer of an autonomous car, I would like you to familiarize yourself with Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, as well as the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers recommendations. Feel free to pause and read this, as I will just talk about them in a more general sense. Now, Asimov's laws are more utilitarian and based on a human-robot independence, whereas the IEEE recommendations stem from a more symbiote point of view, that is to say, humans and machines exist in parallel. Let me propose a thought experiment, the famous trolley problem. Imagine you find yourself standing at the switch to a train spur and notice a trolley barreling down the track. Ahead of it you see 5 workers on the train's current track, and on the spur there is 1 worker. You realize there is no way to notify the workers that the train is coming, and the only action you can take is to flip the switch to save the 5 men while sacrificing the 1. Do you flip the switch? Most people say yes. In fact, 90% of people do. They have the utilitarian viewpoint, which asks, which saves more lives? As Spock from Star Trek so eloquently put it, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. There is another version of this thought experiment called the man in the yard, where the situation is slightly altered. Here you find yourself in control of a switch to the rails of a second trolley. If you throw the switch, it will collide with the mainline trolley, but the collision will end up killing the worker in the yard. Do you flip the switch? In this example, the right choice might not seem so apparent. Does one decision imply more guilt versus the other if you were charged with manslaughter? So with the autonomous car problem, the story goes is you're the owner of an autonomous vehicle that is currently traveling behind a bus filled with children. Just before a 1-lane bridge, a bolt of lightning strikes a tree, which falls onto the bus, tearing its top off, thereby flinging children from their seats onto the road. Your autonomous car has exactly 2 options. 1. slam the brakes yet run over the children because of the insufficient time to stop. Or 2, avoid the children by veering off the road into the deep canyon below, thus killing all passengers and destroying the vehicle. Now, one can argue the finer points of legal liability in this situation, but don't. Just ask yourself, which subroutine would your autonomous car decide to execute? Which subroutine would you want your autonomous car to execute? This thought experiment might seem straightforward with simply the 2 options to consider. However, with computers, there are always more programmable options. Perhaps the programmer lets the owner choose the outcome with a self-destruction option, in this case veering off the bridge, or continue without prejudice and hitting the children. The programmer could simply randomize their selection, or maybe the programmer looks at the exact second of the day, and if it's odd, runs over the children, and if it's even, runs off the cliff. Now, I will present an option that may seem very upsetting to you. Consider the fact that computers make billions of calculations every second. Autonomous cars will therefore have time between recognizing an imminent incident and the deadline for which to take any one of the necessary actions. Now, let's say this car has the capability of face identification and a public database integration. And in this database, it has their tax information, their insurance information, amongst many other things. It could therefore learn who its passengers are and the children on the road are. It is therefore possible to program the car to estimate the various litigation and liability costs of each outcome and then make the decision to run off the cliff or run over the children from the likelihood of a financially preferred outcome. Now, certainly most of these options violate some sort of categorical robotics imperative, yet certainly programmable options may remain perfectly legal. Now, let's take a look at what the law says. According to New York State's vehicle and traffic law, an owner is liable if the operator is found to be negligent. But how can a computer be found to be negligent? And even if negligence is disproven from recorded sensor data, liability would likely be found under the theory of strict liability to the owner and or the manufacturer of the vehicle. Now, I'm going to argue that ruling under strict liability sets a dangerous precedent. In a future where autonomous cars had significantly higher safety records than ones which are operated by humans, a strict liability theory would promote greater use of human-operated vehicles, since the driver wouldn't be strictly held liable for damages in the same situation. Now, such an interpretation of existing laws would likely be overturned at the appellate level upon the examination of the legal basis for existing doctrines. The appellate court could then determine that pre-existing legal categories no longer apply and recommend to the legislature to enact laws that better address the issues arising from the use of autonomous vehicles. As it has frequently occurred in the past, it should be expected that laws will frequently fall behind technology. However, when it comes to letting computers decide life and death, it behooves us to be preemptive, especially when they will be a fact of our everyday lives. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you've had an excellent semester. I know I have. Take care, and Godspeed.